May 11, 1982, Boston, Massachusetts. A man sits in a parked car, watching the entrance of Anthony's Pier 4 restaurant. A walkie-talkie rests in his hand. Inside the restaurant, two men finish their meal. One is Brian Balloonhead Halloran, a small-time criminal who made the fatal mistake of speaking to the FBI. The other is Michael Donahue, an innocent father of three with no connection to Boston's underworld. His only crime, offering a colleague a ride home on the wrong day. Behind the wheel sits James Whitey Bulger, South Boston's most feared gangster. Disguised with a wig and a fake mustache, he waits patiently, scanning the waterfront. Bulger's trusted lieutenant watches as the two men exit the restaurant and approach a sky blue Datsun. He raises the walkie-talkie and speaks. "The balloon is rising." As the Datsun pulls from the parking lot, he speaks again. "The balloon is in the air." The message received. Bulger puts the car in drive. Donahue is killed instantly. Halloran somehow stumbles from the riddled car, but he can't escape. More shots echo across the harbor as Halloran falls to the pavement. The mission is complete. FBI Agent John Connolly sits alone at his desk as he dials a number known to few. When the line connects, he speaks quietly. "Listen carefully, Whitey. We have a problem. Halloran's cooperating with us about the murder of... you know which one I mean." In the history of American law enforcement, there has never been a case of corruption more devastating than the unholy alliance between the Federal Bureau of Investigation and James Whitey Bulger. And it all began with a handshake between two boys from the same South Boston neighborhood. In 1982, crossing Whitey Bulger meant looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life. Today, the biggest threat to your safety might be sitting in your pocket, and you probably don't even know about it. Right now, your most sensitive personal details are likely being sold online by simply searching your name on Google. That's exactly why we partnered with today's sponsor, Aura, an all-in-one digital security platform that handles the dirty work for you. When you create an Aura account, their system automatically searches the web to identify data brokers selling your personal information, then forces them through the complex removal process. Doing this manually would literally take you years. But Aura can scrub your data from hundreds of these broker websites automatically. Within just a few weeks, you'll see a dramatic drop in those annoying spam calls and junk emails. But Aura goes way beyond just data removal. They're continuously scanning the dark web for traces of your personal information and will immediately notify you if anything suspicious occurs. Like someone attempting to steal your identity or break into your financial accounts. Plus, you get access to their premium VPN service featuring over 100 server locations worldwide. In our increasingly connected world, safeguarding your personal data isn't optional anymore. Aura makes it simple. Start your free 14-day trial today by going to aura.com/ViPPR. Link in description. South Boston, Southie to those who call it home, wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a fortress. Irish Catholic, working class, and bound by an unwritten code as rigid as any mafia oath. Loyalty above all. In this close-knit neighborhood of local shops and churches, two boys were growing up just a few blocks from each other. One would become Boston's most feared criminal, and the other would rise to the top of the FBI. At 14, while most kids were playing outside, James Whitey Bulger was already building a reputation. He was running with street gangs, graduating from petty theft to armed robbery. John Connolly was 6 years younger, but to him, Whitey Bulger wasn't just a name whispered on the streets. He was a legend, a fearless neighborhood enforcer who never backed down, even as a teenager. You see, Bulger had a strict code: protect your own. He handed out ice cream to local boys and crushed bullies without hesitation. One day, when Connolly was cornered by older kids, Bulger stepped in, no questions asked. That moment cemented a bond, a quiet loyalty, and a debt that would echo for decades, long after Bulger traded Southie for the underworld. By the early 1960s, their paths had diverged. Bulger landed in Alcatraz for armed robbery, learning the craft of organized crime from hardened inmates. Meanwhile, John Connolly graduated from the FBI Academy in 1968. After serving in offices across the country, Connolly requested a transfer back to Boston. His career goal? Take down the Italian Mafia, the patriarchal crime family, which dominated New England's organized crime. By 1975, Whitey Bulger had transformed himself. Released from prison 10 years prior, he returned to South Boston with ruthless discipline. He worked his way up through the Winter Hill Gang, an Irish crime outfit operating in the shadows of Boston's underworld. Fall 1975, South Boston. A cold wind blows through a quiet parking lot near Old Harbor. Agent John Connolly comes face to face with Whitey Bulger, their first official meeting. The neighborhood boys are now men in their 40s. Connolly makes his pitch. The Italian Mafia is feeding the FBI intel on Bulger's crew. If he doesn't act first, he'll be next. Bulger listens. He doesn't give an answer. He just leaves Connolly in the unknown. Days pass. Then a message arrives. One of Bulger's men has been gunned down, hit by a soldier from the Italian mob. That same day, Connolly's phone rings. Bulger is in. On September 30th, 1975, the name James Whitey Bulger enters the FBI's informant files as BS 1544TE, top echelon. It was a title reserved for the Bureau's most elite sources. But what they really created was a monster on a leash. What the FBI didn't understand is that they hadn't recruited Bulger. Bulger had recruited them. The handshake deal of 1975 quickly demonstrated its value. Within months of becoming an FBI informant, Bulger was providing intelligence on his main rivals, the patriarchal crime family, and their Boston operation run by the Angulo brothers. Bulger's inside information about the Angulo gambling and loan sharking operations gave them exactly what they needed. For the Winter Hill Gang leader, every piece of information that damaged the Italians cleared the way for his own expansion. At first, the arrangement seemed to benefit everyone. By 1981, Bulger's intelligence had helped the FBI build a rock-solid case against the Angulos. The arrests made headlines nationwide. The Bureau had won a major victory against organized crime. For Connolly, these wins were career-making. He became a star within the Bureau, lauded as the agent who finally cracked Boston's mafia. His supervisor, John Morris, received promotions. Internal memos described Bulger as one of the most highly placed and valuable informants in the Boston area. But behind the headlines, something darker was happening. As the patriarchal family's power diminished, the Winter Hill Gang expanded to fill the vacuum. Bulger took over gambling operations, loan sharking territories, and protection rackets. His reach extended throughout Boston and beyond. The valuable informant wasn't just feeding the FBI information. He was using them to build his own criminal empire. Sometime in 1982, FBI agent John Connolly hosts a dinner gathering at his home. The unusual guest list includes his supervisor John Morris, alongside Winter Hill Gang leaders Whitey Bulger and Stephen Flemmi. Their relationship with Bulger was evolving from law enforcement managing an informant to something more compromising. With the agents increasingly aware that their careers and possibly their safety now depended on Bulger's continued protection and satisfaction. But what Morris didn't fully comprehend that evening was the extent of Bulger's brutality. The Winter Hill leader had already orchestrated multiple killings by this point. The case of Brian Halloran revealed just how deadly this relationship had become. In early May 1982, Halloran, a low-level associate of the Winter Hill gang, quietly approached federal agents. Nervous but desperate, he claimed to have information tying Whitey Bulger directly to the murder of Roger Wheeler, a prominent Oklahoma businessman. For the Bureau, this could have been a breakthrough, but inside the Boston office, that information didn't stay locked away for long. Despite Halloran asking for protection multiple times, the FBI ignored his requests. Instead, Connolly delivered the intelligence straight into Bulger's hands. Just weeks later, Halloran was executed in broad daylight on the Boston waterfront. With him was Michael Donahue, a father of 3 with no ties to organized crime, who just happened to be offering Halloran a ride home that day. Both men were caught in a ruthless shooting. The message was clear: betray Bulger, and you disappear, even if you're an innocent bystander. But the corruption wasn't limited to deadly information. Both Connolly and Morris had started accepting thousands of dollars for keeping their mouths shut and providing Bulger with useful information. Morris would later testify that he accepted these payments in part out of fear, that once he crossed the ethical line with Bulger, he felt trapped. But the evidence suggests both agents enjoyed their cozy relationship with Boston's most notorious gangster. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Bulger was feeding the FBI much less valuable information than they believed. His FBI file, meticulously maintained by Connolly, was filled with intelligence that actually came from other informants. Connolly falsified reports to make Bulger appear more valuable than he was, all to justify the continued protection of his childhood hero. Massachusetts State Police and the Drug Enforcement Administration became increasingly frustrated as their investigations into Bulger's operations mysteriously fell apart. Surveillance locations were compromised, wiretaps discovered, and witnesses intimidated. Law enforcement officials outside the FBI were baffled by how Bulger always seemed to be one step ahead, until they began to suspect he had protection from within the Bureau itself. It's 1981. Deborah Davis, the 26-year-old girlfriend of Bulger's partner Stephen, the rifleman, Flemmy, has discovered something she shouldn't know. Flemmy has revealed to her that he and Bulger are FBI informants. This is information that can get people killed. And it does. Davis is escorted to a vacant South Boston home Flemmy had just bought. As she enters, Bulger grabs her from behind. His arm locks around her throat. Flemmy watches as Bulger strangles the young woman to death. They bury her body near the Neponset River, where it will remain hidden for decades. This calculated brutality revealed the true Whitey Bulger, a man whose public persona as Southeast protector masked a ruthless criminal enterprise, while portraying himself as the neighborhood guardian who kept drugs away from local kids. Court records would later reveal a different reality. Bulger controlled a massive drug operation, taking a percentage from every dealer in his territory while simultaneously feeding information to the FBI about rival drug traffickers. This perfect circle of corruption eliminated competition while filling his pockets with millions. Psychologists who later studied Bulger described him as a textbook sociopath, someone completely lacking in empathy, but highly skilled at manipulating others. He understood exactly how to play on Connolly's admiration for the Bulger family and his desire to advance his career. Connolly had now become a supervisor at the Boston FBI office. His promotion wasn't just a career move. It gave him even more power to protect Whitey Bulger and keep him out of the FBI's crosshairs. The cash payments from Bulger, later estimated at over $200,000, allowed him to live beyond what a federal agent should have been able to afford. By the late 1980s, other law enforcement agencies were growing increasingly frustrated. Massachusetts State Police, the DEA, and even other FBI agents outside Connolly's circle began asking questions about why Bulger seemed immune to prosecution. But the true extent of the corruption and the shocking death toll it enabled would remain hidden for years to come. As the 1990s approached, the devil's bargain was about to face its first real test. The first serious blow came from an unexpected source. A team of investigative reporters of the Boston Globe Spotlight Unit had begun asking uncomfortable questions about Bulger's apparent immunity from prosecution. Their reporting suggested connections between Bulger and the FBI that went far beyond a normal informant relationship. The media scrutiny created external pressure that the FBI could no longer entirely contain. Inside the Bureau, a new generation of agents unconnected to Connolly was starting to look at the Winter Hill Gang with fresh eyes. In 1990, a new special agent in charge arrived at the Boston FBI office. Unlike his predecessors, he wasn't part of the old guard who had protected Bulger. He began asking tough questions about why this particular informant seemed untouchable. The pressure was taking its toll on John Morris. Consumed by guilt and fear of exposure, Morris made a decision that would bring down the entire corrupt enterprise. In April 1995, Morris confessed everything to federal prosecutors and the Boston Globe. He admitted to accepting bribes from Bulger, to helping protect him from investigation, and most damning of all, he confirmed that the FBI had been complicit in multiple murders by leaking the identities of informants. With Morris's testimony, federal prosecutors now had what they needed. An indictment was prepared against Bulger, Flemmi, and several associates, charging them with extortion, racketeering, and involvement in 19 murders. For John Connolly, everything was falling apart. But he had one final, fateful act of corruption to commit. According to later testimony, Connolly learned of the sealed indictment against Bulger before it was to be executed. On December 23, 1994, he made a phone call that would define the next chapter of the saga. Tipped off by Connolly, Bulger disappeared just hours before agents arrived to arrest him. His longtime girlfriend, Catherine Grieg, went with him. They left their apartment behind in a hurry, emptied of valuables and cash. Bulger had been preparing for this moment. Multiple false identities and cash reserves were already in place. By January 1995, James Whitey Bulger was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted list. The agent who had helped him escape, John Connolly, remained in the FBI for 2 more years before the extent of his corruption was fully uncovered. While Bulger escaped, his partner Stephen Flemmi wasn't so lucky and was arrested in January 1995. In a desperate legal maneuver, Flemmi's defense made a stunning claim in court that he and Bulger had been given immunity by the FBI for their crimes in exchange for information. This official court filing blew the lid off the corrupt relationship, forcing the government to confront decades of FBI misconduct. The scandal reached the highest levels of government. Congress held hearings on FBI corruption. Internal investigations were launched. The Boston FBI office was completely overhauled, and John Connolly found himself facing the very justice system he had once represented. In December 1999, Connolly was indicted on charges of racketeering, obstruction of justice, and making false statements. His trial exposed the full extent of the corrupt relationship, revealing how deeply the FBI had been compromised. In 2002, Connolly was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. Later, he would face even more serious charges related to his role in several murders. Meanwhile, Whitey Bulger had vanished. Despite one of the largest manhunts in FBI history, he seemed to have disappeared completely. The hunt for Bulger spanned continents. Reported sightings placed him in London, Sicily, Uruguay, and dozens of other locations. The FBI received thousands of tips, but Bulger remained invisible. The truth was far less exotic than the rumors. While investigators searched globally, Bulger and his girlfriend, Catherine Grieg, were living quietly in a modest apartment in Santa Monica, California. They went by the names Charles and Carol Gasco. To neighbors, they were simply an elderly couple who kept to themselves. For the families of Bulger's victims, each passing year without capture deepened their pain. The children of Michael Donahue, the innocent man killed alongside informant Brian Halloran, grew up and started families of their own, all while fighting for justice for their father. Meanwhile, the government faced a reckoning. In a landmark 2009 decision, a federal judge ruled that the FBI was responsible for the deaths of Halloran and Donahue, finding that the FBI's corrupt protection of Bulger had directly led to their murders. The court initially awarded both families a combined $8.2 million, which was later overturned, ruling that the families had filed their claims too late. John Connolly's fall from grace continued. In 2008, he was convicted of second-degree murder for his role in the killing of John Callahan, a Bulger victim whose identity Connolly had leaked. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison, effectively a life sentence for the aging former agent. By 2011, the FBI had doubled the reward for information leading to Bulger's capture to $2 million, a new strategy focused on finding Catherine Grieg, with public service announcements targeting areas where women her age might frequent. Then, on June 22, 2011, the 16-year manhunt came to an abrupt end. A former neighbor from Santa Monica saw the news about Catherine Grieg and made the connection to the elderly Carol Gasco she had known. They lured Bulger to the building's garage with a ruse about a break-in. When he emerged, they confronted him. The most wanted criminal in America, once the FBI's protected informant, was finally in custody. On August 12, 2013, the jury returned their verdict. Bulger was found guilty of 31 of 32 counts, including involvement in 11 murders. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms plus 5 years, a sentence he would never complete. Bulger was transferred to several facilities before arriving at the Hazleton Federal Penitentiary in West Virginia in October 2018. Despite his notoriety and age, now 89, he was placed in the general population. Less than 12 hours after his arrival, on October 30th, 2018, Bulger was beaten to death by inmates. His eyes were nearly gouged out, and he was beaten with a lock wrapped in a sock, a brutal end that many saw as final justice for a man who had inflicted so much suffering. The true measure of this tragedy lies not in Bulger's infamous legacy, but in the lives he destroyed. The Donahue family spent 37 years fighting for justice. The Davis family waited 19 years before Deborah's remains were finally found. Some families never received closure at all. The FBI's deal with Whitey Bulger wasn't just a bureaucratic misstep. It was a fundamental betrayal that cost innocent lives, corrupted the justice system, and betrayed public trust. It stands as a stark reminder that the line between law enforcement and criminals must remain clear and unbreachable, because once that line blurs, everyone becomes complicit. And no one, not the criminals, not their protectors, and certainly not the innocent, escapes unscathed.